Okay, so we are here to talk about the Foundation Directory Online, which is an online database of funders, primarily in the US, but also includes a lot of them all over the world, as well as government sources, private philanthropy, all of that. So we'll get into that, but before, like everything, nothing's for free. We're going to have to go through a couple of commercials here. As you know, my name is Bryce. I work with the Helen Bader Institute. I'm also a certified trainer for Candid, which you'll learn more about here in a moment. That my contact information is there. I am recording today. You'll get an email with access to the recording, as well as the PowerPoint and all of the handouts within, well, it says next 48 hours. Given the weekend, you might not get it till Monday, but if I can get to it today, we'll do that. Don't worry about using the chat. Just feel free to unmute with any questions you have. I always say, turning off your video can help with bandwidth. I'm probably going to do that here shortly because my bandwidth in my neighborhood tends to be a little funky first thing in the morning. So we'll do that here shortly. So as you know, we'll go through the commercial. I don't need to really go through too much of this in detail. HBI has been around for 20 years. We're going into our 20th anniversary this year, which is exciting. We have graduate education, non-credit education. We have one of the only accredited programs graduate programs in the nonprofit or philanthropic studies arena in the world, which is pretty cool that it's here in Wisconsin of all places. And then we cover a lot of different areas of research into the sector, internationally, nationally, statewide, as well as just locally. And focus on a lot of different community engagement and development programs like this one as part of our nonprofit Skills Academy. We're very happy to have partnered with Candid as a training member to this national organization that we'll talk about shortly to bring courses like this. Our contact information is there. If you don't follow us on social media, I would always encourage it. We post things, not only what we're doing, but what other organizations around the state are doing as well. Finally, then, Candid, and bear with me because I am obligated to read some of this to you. Get caught up on my notes here. What is Candid? So on February 1st, 2019, the Foundation Center and GuideStar joined forces to become Candid, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. And together, these organizations brought a combined 88 years of expertise and millions of data points to Candid. And every year, millions of nonprofits spend trillions of dollars around the world. Candid finds out where that money comes from, where it goes, and why it matters. They believe that an effective social sector is critical for a thriving society, and they believe in the importance of solutions for the sector by the sector. So with Candid, nonprofits, foundations, donors, and the general public can all be on the same page. And they do that through research, collaboration, and training. Candid connects people who want to change the world to the resources they need to do it. And with Candid, you can find funding with the Foundation Directory online and search. I think right now it's up to over 165,000 funders and 16 million grants, and increase your visibility with the funder community by creating and maintaining your organization's GuideStar nonprofit profile. And if it's not up to date, I would strongly recommend your organization do that, because people do look at it for information about who you are and what you do. And you can also continue to strengthen your nonprofit by participating in Candid learning trainings, just like this one, to move your fundraising skills to the next level. Thank you for being part of Candid's learning community. We recognize that this can be a challenging time for many people and many organizations. So Candid has shifted its key learning opportunities to a virtual format, as many have. for this past year, and you can check them out. The link here, I'm going to be dropping some information here in the chat with all of these links for you. They've invested in providing the social sector with the resources they need to make informed decisions about today's most pressing issues. And you'll find resources here related to COVID, as well as racial equity concerns that offered by both Candid and HBI. And so with that, let me get back onto my screen. You can connect. There's a link there to get their learning newsletter that will provide information on courses like this one, both free and for a fee, as well as a lot of other services and products, I guess you could call them, that they offer. So with that, let's get to why you're really here. And I'm going to dig into this and get myself all ready. So let's talk about the Foundation Directory Online. So FDO, as we said, stands for the Foundation Directory Online, which is a research tool that is produced by Candid, which is formerly known as the Foundation Center. And today we're going to cover how you can use FDO to find funders for your nonprofit work. So by the time we're finished, you should be able, first of all, to explain what it is, identify your needs before you start searching it with it, and to find grants and grant prospects with a project-based search. And we'll talk a lot more about what that means. And then be able to decide if those prospects are a good fit for your needs, for your grant needs and funding needs. We'll also cover where you can access FDO and how to get help if you need it. But first, I want to take just kind of a quick poll. How do you find your funding now, Mark? There are a number of different ways that organizations will do that. They can just do an online search. You can dig around and look for RFPs, use GuideStar to look for organizations that might meet your funding needs. You can look at Funders 990s, where they are obligated to list the grants that they have provided over the past year. There are a lot of different ways that organizations will do this. When you search the internet, I think it's important to know that less than 10% of foundations actually have a website. So, not even Google can help you find a foundation website if it doesn't exist. And so you're left with gathering clues from news clips and other organizations' donor lists. You'll find that obviously the larger foundations will have a website, but there are so many private family foundations that do not. In terms of looking for RFPs, and just to clarify, RFP stands for Request for Proposals. Less than half of 1% of foundations actually publish RFPs because they aren't legally required to do that. So it's obviously not a real comprehensive way to look for foundational giving. GuideStar, we love GuideStar, but the GuideStar profiles are designed for transparency, not for grant seeking analysis. So you won't always find the grants data or application guidelines or other information that can help you with your grants research. And then finally, with 990s, first of all, you need to know the foundation's name. So other drawbacks are that the 990s will show 1 year's worth of grants, which is great. But with that, you can't see the trends. They also have a lot of unneeded information, and they're usually not searchable. So there's a lot of legwork involved. And so how can you find potential funders who don't have websites or publish RFPs or maintain their GuideStar profiles, but are giving grants every year for work like yours? And the answer, of course, is using the Foundation Directory online. FDO is a searchable web-based tool that lets you find funders faster, so then you can spend more time building the relationships with them that matter so much. It has a very, very rich data set on US and international philanthropy, and it's unsurpassed in terms of scope. I mean, we're talking over 165,000 funders, over a million grant recipients. I think I said there's 16 million grants in the database, and they're adding over 4 million a year that they draw all of this information and analysis from. The funders, the types of funders that you'll find in there are private foundations, community foundations, public charities, corporate giving programs, foreign grant makers, as well as federal agencies. So it's also unsurpassed in terms of depth. It has detailed profiles of funders, grants, recipients, for-profit businesses, and in a few moments you'll see what I mean as we get into the database. It's also unsurpassed in terms of currency, and that means not in terms of money, but it's updated daily with profile changes and grant records. And in addition, more than, I think, over 1,000 funders send their grants data directly to FDO, so that grant seekers can access that information that much sooner. And as for the majority of the funders, data comes from their 990s, but FDO uses a variety of other sources to inform the profiles. Grantmaker websites, you can see the list here. It's pulling from a lot of different places to build these foundation profiles. So we're still not quite ready to jump in. We want to talk a little bit about kind of developing a strategy so you can optimize your time while you're doing your research, and that this applies not just to FDO, but to grant seeking and donor research in general. Before you start your search, you need to have a clear idea of the project you want to fund. It'll make your research that much more focused, and you'll also get a bigger variety of prospects using FDO if you can think of different ways to describe your project. And so here are 3 questions to help you brainstorm different descriptions. Who are they serving? Where are they? And what are you doing for them? So for today, let's see here. Let's pretend that our search is for we have a Title I elementary school here in Milwaukee that has an after-school program that will teach kids how to choose and prepare healthy foods and how to exercise through play. We want to do this because we're horrified by the skyrocketing rates of obesity, diabetes, and just general lack of fitness among the students. So let's think about different ways to describe this program. So who are we serving? We're serving children. We're serving elementary students, maybe low income, maybe they are specific minorities or specific genders. Where are they? They're in Milwaukee. They're in Milwaukee County. They're in Southeast Wisconsin, the Midwest, the Great Lakes region. There's many ways to look at where funders' interests may be concentrated. And then finally, what are we doing for them? We're cooking, we're providing food choices, nutrition, exercise, recreation. We're tackling obesity, diabetes, health and wellness, after-school program. There's many different keywords we can tie into. So here in just a couple of minutes, we've come up with a number of different ways to describe the program. And this is important because not all funders will use the same words. They won't all use just the same cut and paste description of the types of programs they're funding. And this will, by approaching it this way, it'll help us find a bigger variety of prospects. So now I'm going to switch us over to Foundation directory online. This is the homepage. This is what you'll see when you log in or when you access the site. I do need to clarify too, there, as you probably know, there are, normally this is provided in a face-to-face opportunity. You'll find a lot of the UW-Milwaukee is one of now 8 different access points to the FDO. Normally, you are only provided access through, in our case, UWM's official login to get you access to the full professional access package. Because of COVID and a lot of the face-to-face issues we're having, Candid has provided an online access with a 24-hour day pass that individuals like you can access from your own workspace. That is only valid through December, the end of 2021. After that, you will, my guess is they're going to go back to business as usual, and you'll only be able to access FDO from a specified point. There is one at UW-Madison, UW-Milwaukee, here in Milwaukee, also at Marquette University, Stevens Point, and a handful of public libraries around the state. I will say the day pass makes it very convenient, except for the fact that it's 24 hours consecutively, not 24 hours over the course of a month. You will, so I always say, make sure you kind of do your homework first, as we're going to talk about here, before you actually log in, and then you strategize about how you can use that 24 hours, because obviously you're not going to be there from midnight to midnight searching. So perhaps use an afternoon one day and then the next morning, if you don't want to necessarily spending your entire workday using FDO. So, and then at the you'll see a clock as you kind of up here. Normally, what I'm told anyway, is that, let's do this, because I think I have set myself up for the day pass. I don't even know where I'm at on this. Yeah, my day pass is expired. I think you have to you just have to simply reapply month after month. But we are going to actually use my professional pass here, so we have full access to this. And I'll show you all of the different features that you can use once we get back to normal. So this is our homepage. So in most cases, a project-based search that we were talking about will get you the best results. When you get to FDO, you'll see a single find funding search box. That's this. If you check up at the top of the page, you have a find funding link. It'll always take you to this find funding bar. So let's just plug in here what we are looking for. We're looking for after school program. No, let's do this. We're going to do an after school health program for low income students in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So you'll see here, it picked up on Milwaukee, and it's offering you a number of different Milwaukee organizations with Milwaukee in the title. Don't worry about that. We're just going to click search, and you'll notice right away, all of a sudden, we've got some results here. And what I think is most interesting is how it has taken this sentence and broken it up into key search words. Instead of, we've got out of school learning, program support, Milwaukee, low income students, low income people and students. To see how this search is set up, you can just click on edit here, and it'll give you some of the keywords that it pulled from from your initial search. And you can, I'm going to click additional to show you all of the different search fields, and we'll come back to this quite a bit. So we can see that FDO chose out of school learning, the population served are low-income students, program strategy, so our support strategy is program support. It pulled all of this out of your initial statement. If you don't like FDO's suggested search setup, you can build your own search with these. And let's see how we can modify this. So instead of, let's say, low income, let's do this. You can click in the field and you'll immediately get a drop-down box for all of the different areas that it pulls from. Social and economic status, at risk, youth, economically disadvantaged. Let's choose, let's broaden this a little bit from low income to economically disadvantaged. And want to see out of school learning, but let's also look for, let's see, child welfare. That's what we're looking for. So you can, there are a couple of different ways to approach finding different search terms. I would encourage you to poke around and look and see what's in there. It's pretty amazing how they've broken it up. And these are all developed from past grants, past funding initiatives. If it's out there, it's going to be a part of the search terms. So let's click search, and you can see once this processes, we picked up a number of different grant makers, grants, and so on. I'm actually going to, let's see. No, that's okay. So you'll notice above the subject area and population served, there are these little down carrots with match any. By default, it will show to match any. FDO will cast a really wide net for funders, so it will return matches with just one of your search subject terms. If you want to limit your search, change this, for example, to match all. And in this case, the results must correspond to all of your search terms. And you'll see we've got 152 grant makers here. If we change that, we've dropped it, cut it by half. But this, let's just say that this is too limited. I'm going to change it back to match any. And so we have some more results to talk about here. The other thing I want to point out is you will want to use subject area and geographic focus in your search because these two areas are required fields in grant records, in how FDO looks at grant records. Subject area it describes what you're doing. Geographic focus describes where you're doing it. Those two of the three questions we were talking about. By geographic, the difference between geographic focus and location, which is right under here, this is going to be the geographic, the physical location of the grant maker, where their head office is located. This is going to be the area, the geographic focus will be the area served by the grant. So just to clarify. Let's look at our initial results down here. I want to quickly cover how FDO searches work so you can understand why some funders are in these results. So now that they're adding more than 4 million grants a year to FDO, search results are solely based on grants data because, as we know, past giving can best predict future giving. This means that if a funder gave at least one grant that matched your search, it'll be in your results. And the funders, the grants, and the recipient numbers are all connected. So in this case, the search found 152 grants or grant makers who gave 878 grants to 114 recipients. And one thing I want to point out, between 2003 and 2021. So that's a pretty significant time frame. I always suggest cut it down to 5 years. That's usually going to be most useful to you. Communities' needs change over time. Grant makers' focus will change according to community needs. And so these figures will change. By just looking at the past 5 years, you're going to get the most pertinent, most relevant information. And you'll see this changed our numbers quite a bit. So we don't have quite as few to dig through, which is actually not a bad thing. The results of these are also sorted by grant count. When you look at the grant makers, it's automatically sorted by grant count. So the funders who gave the most grants that matched your search will be at the top of the list here. And these will be your strongest prospects based on your past giving. FDO will search all the grants on record. So if you want to focus on, like I said, on the last 5 years, use that year filter. Then use these colors as a guide. This first, it's more or less all color coded. Grant makers are in blue, grants in orange, recipients in teal, and then the 990s in green. And let's go ahead and click View All. And we have 103 grant makers that we're talking about here. This total number, it may seem high. Don't let it scare you. You don't have to analyze 100 profiles here. As you scroll down, even on this first page, you'll notice that the number of grants that they have issued in the last 5 years drops pretty dramatically to single digits pretty fast. And you'll find that's going to be the case every time. Focus on the funders that give many grants for work like yours. Save the rest of these for later, or ignore them completely. But instead, you can also then try a new search using some of these other descriptions you brainstormed earlier and get a totally different set of results and then compare them. Let's see here. I'm going to switch back to our PowerPoint as we talk about evaluating the results. So once you find a list of prospective funders, you can use FDO to evaluate your results so that you spend your time on the strongest prospects. And so here are 5 questions to kind of ask yourself to decide if a funder is a good fit. First of all, do you meet this funder's requirements? Is your mission or project's goal a priority to them? How big are the grants that they normally give? Does this funder support organizations who do work like yours? And then finally, do you know anybody associated with this funder? Mark, I just saw your question in the chat. The day pass does have some limitations. You will not actually be, I think, I'll go back towards the end here because you'll see some of the areas will be grayed out in comparison. You will have access to all, quite frankly, all of the stuff you need to do the kind of work we're talking about. I believe you don't get access to the actual grant information, which we'll cover with the day pass. And I think, I'm trying to remember if it's the grant or the recipient profiles. But when you do go to the campus or the library, you will have the full access then. That's how it worked when they set up this day pass. They just recently made some changes to it. So I will admit I'm not completely sure what it is you won't have access to with the day pass. I do know that you'll have access to do all of the sort of grant maker analysis in order to find the information you're looking for that we'll be talking about here today. So, okay. So, I want to talk a little bit about how the grantmaker profiles that we're going to talk about can help answer the questions that we've just listed here. Let's see. Where am I at here? Nope. We'll go back. We're going to go back to FDO. So let's take a look. I always choose, we're going to use the Greater Milwaukee Foundation as a guinea pig here. When you look at actually, before I go back here, hang on. What I was talking about before, you'll find that I'm pretty sure it's these two, the orange and the teal will be gray, and you won't be able to click on them. But as I said, it's useful, but it's not really going to be the priority of what you're going to be doing here for the kind of grant seeking analysis that we normally find people are going to be using. So GMF. So before we take a look at this entire profile, let's look at the funder's limitations to answer the very first question. Do I meet this funder's requirements? So to do that, it's kind of interesting. The menu is actually over here on the side, this little gray bar. Let's go ahead first and click on Applications, RFPs, and it gives us this information. At the very bottom, you'll see a box called Giving Limitations. And this box will tell you what is not funded. So you can see right away if there's anything that immediately will disqualify you from this particular grant maker. In this case, it gives primarily in Milwaukee, Ozaukee, Washington, and Waukesha counties. No support for C4s or C6s or general use of churches or religious purposes and so on. It tells you right up front if you are listed in any of these categories, this is probably not a grant maker that you're going to want to spend time digging into. A common statement you'll see here is applications not accepted, particularly for smaller funders. If you see this, keep reviewing the profile. Don't reject a funder before you've looked at how much they might have in common with you. This funder is in your results because it gave grants that match your search. And that means it's actively funding your kind of work. So many of these foundations are willing to consider new applicants, but they list applications not accepted as a way to limit the number of proposals they receive. They're using other methods to learn how to learn about possible grantees, like often because they're just so small and don't have the capacity to review a huge flood of applications. Chances are you have a personal or professional contact who can help you meet people at that foundation. Networking, quite frankly, is the most effective method to get on any funder's radar, whether or not it accepts unsolicited applications. And there is a feature in FDO in the Who's Who section, and you may be surprised at the connections you would find. So once you've determined that you meet the funder's requirements, the next question you want to answer is my mission or project goal a priority for this funder? These colorful charts at the top will quickly tell us the trends of the funder's last 5 years of grants in terms of subject here, location, and then grant size. You can use this purple chart to see if a grant maker's highest priority subjects correspond to your mission or project. And you can just hover over that and see how much they have funded these particular initiatives over the last 5 years. And then when we get to the blue map, the darkest are going to tell you where the funder gave most. Obviously, it's going to be Wisconsin. And in this case, all of the states are shaded, so it does suggest that this funder gives nationwide, primarily probably because of its donor advised funds. They have initiatives, their donors specifically are helping to fund all over the place. But you can kind of see where the primary focus is still here in Wisconsin. And then how big are the grants that they give? You want to make sure you ask for an amount that fits in the funder's giving range. You don't want to ask for a $100,000 grant from a funder who usually gives 10K for your work, or vice versa. So looking at the green chart, it'll show by volume the size of these funders' grants, which will give us an idea of the typical grant size that they give. Interestingly, it's under 5,000. So let's scroll down here to the grants section. This orange section here, and will provide more details on the funders grants. And if you started with a project search, the funder profile will only show the grants that this funder has given that match your search, as well as the most common grant amount for these grants. And this is based on multiple years of grants. So this means you don't have to go through 990s with your highlighter anymore. If you look up a foundation with no subject area or geographic focus filter, you're going to miss out on this really kind of important level of detail. The grant section will help you answer the fourth question on the list, was, does this funder support organizations like yours? Part of figuring out, excuse me, how much to ask for is to look at the types of recipients. So if we click on this view all button, to see, you can see if a smaller organization like yours has received grants. This is automatically sorted by year. You can change this, but you probably have a good idea what organizations in your community are doing similar work. You can do just a quick visual scan to see who's out there in their recipient list. Let's see, when you click on the grant amount, it's going to change to see the range of grant size and the types of organizations that get the larger versus the smaller grants. You'll notice here too that their smaller amounts are quite small actually. But that gives you an idea of the kind of organizations that are getting larger dollar amounts. So let's go back to the grantmaker profile here. And that fifth and last question is, do I know anyone associated with the funder? So I said before, networking is the most effective method to get on any funder's radar. You can find potential connections to those grant makers right here in the profile. If you go here to who's who, it'll take you to a listing of the board as well as the primary staff. Oh, they've updated this recently. That was always a pet peeve of mine, is that their GMF profile was out of date and they had people listed that didn't work there anymore, but they've updated it just from a month ago. That's great. One thing that they haven't done here, and I honestly cannot find a Wisconsin foundation that uses this feature, but if you'll see, they have the option of connecting their LinkedIn profiles to each of these people. So you can click on this, it will automatically take you to LinkedIn, where you can see where your personal and professional connections match their who's who. And if you do that, you can kind of see who in your network might be able to provide you with an introduction or to help navigate that connection. It's kind of an interesting feature, but as I said, I still haven't been able to find a Wisconsin foundation that actually uses that yet. So, so that's great that they finally updated it. Let's go back to the menu here, and we're going to scroll down and look at all of these different features here. The About section here will show you the purpose and activities, as well as their background history, as well as the primary areas of program funding that they focus on. This can be very useful. I also like the other funders to consider. Something's changed in this since last month when I offered this, but it will show you, based on similar patterns of giving, other grant makers that may show up based on what you're searching for. These don't actually change based on your search terms, which this is very confusing. I'm not quite sure what has changed here, because there used to be funders here listed. My apologies for this, but it gives you another idea, a way to look for kind of similar funders that are out there, and you can just click to their profile. Applications and RFPs, we've talked about the giving limitations, but it will also show you guidelines, deadlines, the initial approach, when that information is available. Read these carefully and follow the instructions. If you're not sure what they mean, pick up the phone and ask. Not following these instructions can cost you a grant. It's pretty important to follow their rules. Especially larger funders, they have an administrative process, and if you don't match that process, you will fall through the cracks. So if you have any questions or concerns, if maybe you don't have some of the information they're looking for, but have something similar, call them up and ask them, will you accept this? Don't just submit it without that kind of approval or permission, because as I said, they get so many, particularly like the GMF, they get so many requests, they have to narrow them down some way. And this, just the simple ability of following instructions is pretty core to whether or not your organization will then follow the terms of the grant as well. So finally, the communications section here. It'll show you other channels to learn more about the grant maker, especially if they don't have a website. It'll also show the social media channels. I would recommend following all channels owned by your funding prospects, because you'll learn a lot about them, like funding announcements, personnel changes, their views on effective social change strategies, and even more, all of which you can help tailor your ask to meet their interests. We've talked about all of these financials. I just want to point out their fiscal year assets, and then also all of the 990s that FDO is using that they have on file, that they're using for a lot of the data you're pulling here. Contact information down here at the bottom, which you would probably have, but just in case, it'll be listed here as well as any organizations they belong to, and information that they put out each year, reports and so on. As we look at the grant maker record, are there any questions about the profiles here? There's a lot of information there, but it's pretty easy to narrow that down. Got it. Good. So now you might be wondering, this is great. So what if I want to save all of this information to share it later, or because you have limited access, how do you save this? So you can do this using this tools box up here at the top. You can whether you have the day pass or whether it's at any of the other access locations, you'll have 3 options for saving the funder's information. There's a little PDF icon. You can download this full record as a PDF to save on your USB drive or laptop or wherever you want. You can also email yourself a PDF of this whole record just by clicking on the button, envelope button. And then you can also, you can save multiple records at once. So let's go back to our grantmakers list here. You'll see here in the little tools button, you have PDF, you have your envelope. You can, click on a profile and it'll save it that way. You can also save or email up to 10 full records by doing this, doing it this way, or up to 25 list items all at once. You can export up to 25 items as a CSV file here, but it won't have all the fields that you'll see in the full grantmaker record. So for the most part, especially if you're looking at, oops, why did I do that? Kind of your top 10 funders here, just click on your top 10 profiles, hit the little button, and it will email you PDFs of all 10 records that way. So you can, evaluate them later and kind of have that information at hand. It's a great way, quite frankly, especially if you have limited access or limited time, to do different searches. We talked about the different search terms as a way to kind of look at how your work is being described, and then kind of come up with those and then take the information back to the office for further analysis if you want to. Let's go back here to find funding, and we're going to cover some sort of common use cases here. If you want to look up a specific foundation, or say, search by organization, you'll immediately get the highlighted organization name field. In this case, then we'll do this. It gives you all of the foundations out there with the name Bader in them, and I'm using Bader because we're closely affiliated with Bader Philanthropies here in Milwaukee. And you can narrow that down to grant makers only or recipients only. We're going to look at grant makers only. And you can then check on who knew that there were so many foundations or philanthropic entities out there with the name Bader. So let's filter that by location. And we'll go to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and that oops, what did I just do? I clicked out of my field here. And that gives us, you can click the ones you want if you specifically want to look at it. And you have a little flyout tab icon here, and it'll open that profile in a new browser tab there. So you would use this same field if you were looking up a recipient organization to see who has, who this organization is funded, or I'm sorry, if you were looking for a recipient organization to see who has funded them. It's a good strategy if you're having a hard time finding good prospects. Chances are you know of 1 or 2 organizations with similar missions or services as yours. So let's do this. Guest House of Milwaukee is a nonprofit here in Milwaukee. We know the kind of work they do as a homeless shelter, and you can find their profile. Okay, so let's clear this out. So if we want to look up an individual, say you had a fundraising gala last week and you want to see if any of your guests are connected to foundations. we have the who's who section. Let's go back here. You can do that, or you can go back to find funding and click search by person, and immediately it takes you to that field. I'm going to type in somebody I know, and we'll search for her, and it will immediately show all of the foundations and grants that that particular person is tied to. Now, she happens to be the vice president of community engagement for Beta Philanthropies and has been for forever. So that's going to be the only grant maker that'll show up in her profile here. And that way, you can kind of see if you have connections, or if you know of a person, you can immediately find out, well, are they tied to a foundation in any way? Can I find an access point or connection there? Let's go back here, and I want to make sure we've covered all of this. We've talked about subject area, geographic focus, population served. Support strategy, if you are looking for specific types of funding, focusing on capacity building or a capital campaign, general support, program support, all different ways to look at funders that might actually look at, where'd it go? Yeah, I'm not even looking at new programming. If you're looking at research or in general support, capital campaigns, and so on, you can get down pretty granular there. Yes, it does come. General support or program support is going to be kind of what you find most often in here. General tends to be sort of the catch-all. If they don't list, more than likely, if they're grants for capacity building or technical assistance, which we run into a lot here, there you'll find the outliers listed. For the most part, general or sort of general program support are going to be the most common that you're going to find on any grant, just because I say they're kind of catch-alls. And quite frankly, with smaller family foundations, they're not necessarily going to get so specific in their grant requirements and in their outcomes measurement that, say, a Beta Philanthropies or a community foundation might be. You're going to find the more specific the sort of support strategy type, the more specific the outcomes report, that the follow-up report of the grant is going to be. General support, it's going to be the kind of grant where they, here's the money, we want to hear about what you're doing, but they're not necessarily, more than likely, not going to be looking for real detailed numbers. That's just my observation. Transaction type is useful if you are looking for specific things like matching gifts, matching grants, pro bono, all of this. This is kind of useful if you're looking for something specific. Generally, this is going to be blank unless, like I say, you're trying to find an employee matching program for a for-profit business. That's how you'll kind of break that down. Organization type. We're looking at for-profit, corporate giving programs, giving circles. There's all different ways to look. If you're looking specifically at government funding, whether it's on the state or local or national level, that all will break down, again, if you're looking for something specific. Otherwise, by leaving it blank, your search is going to pull from all of those. EIN, I don't think you're probably ever going to look at that unless you have something very, very, very specific you're looking for. Grant amounts. The keyword is what I'm kind of working towards here. I want to warn you a little bit about using the keyword field. Use this only if you're looking for a very specific word or phrase, because an FDO will return records that contain only that search string. So for example, if you do a keyword search for disabilities, plural, FDO won't return records with related terms like disability, single, or disabled, or so on. You'll do that by using probably population served up here. Funders will use a variety of words to describe the same kind of work. So using this find funding search box instead is probably going to be the best way to capture most, if not all, of those different variations in your results. Not saying you can't use keyword, but as I said, it's only for something very specific if you are only looking for something. Otherwise, I generally don't recommend it. So this is pretty much a wrap up of all of the features of it and kind of how to use some of these different search word or areas. Do you have any questions about the FDO platform itself at this point? Because otherwise we'll kind of move on, and we're close to time here, but you will find once we do get back to normal, and once it's going to be, the FDO access will be free in Madison at I forget the actual location of it, but it'll be free access, and it'll be free here at the Golda Meir Library. Yeah, and at the UWM, it is not accessible now at the library since we've been closed. We haven't set that up yet. We're actually working on it over the summer to get that set up remotely. If you, let's go back here. I'm gonna go back to my browser. Oh, I'm in the browser, sorry, duh. I'm gonna go back to our home page, or with HBI. You can, if you go to our Skills Academy, if you haven't done this already, hang on a second. Why am I not here? You'll find the Foundation directory online and provide an access application form. Complete this, and I'll put this link in the chat. You can register for access. We're just trying to track who's using it. It's available. HBI, we have an arrangement with Candid that we've been able to provide this day pass access statewide for the year. I think we are one of the only access point here in Wisconsin that's doing this. You can complete that. I'll send you a link that takes you to FDO, where it's kind of a special link where you can create your own profile in your own password and have that day pass set up. So you'll have those 24 hours every month. It won't necessarily work if you pass it around. So it's set up by individual. So that's just one way to access it. Let's go back. I do want to show some resources. You can access it there. You can access it. As I said, we're one of 8 locations around the state. If you are running into questions, you can also subscribe. If your organization wants to pay for it, you can subscribe and get your own full access package. There are different levels of subscription. I'll put some things here in the chat shortly, as well as email them to you with some of that information as well. But I want to show, just if you do run into help, there's a guide of how to kind of help work through some of this. There's also a chat feature and a questions feature for you to contact the candid people on duty at that particular time. I would also recommend, if you want to look more at some of the features, Candid's YouTube channel is really pretty great. There are a whole series of videos talking about all the different aspects of FDO and the search capabilities there. I do want to go back to the PowerPoint here and just wrap up. Talked about some of the ways to get to it, as well as some of the resources. I'm always here. I'm usually available by email or by phone if you have questions. Otherwise, we have a few things coming up. On Monday, we have another course, an introduction to fundraising planning, which I think is quite a good class, actually, talking about some of the basic approaches to designing a fundraising program. It's fairly basic, but it's still, I think, very, very useful. We also have a nonprofit sort of crisis budgeting course available, self-paced. That is all part of our Nonprofit Skills Academy. I would also recommend, as I said before, checking out Candid's other offerings. Just log in, get on their email list, and you'll get updated on all of that. So I think in general, if you are new to grant seeking, or there's a lot of ways to do it wrong. But I think some of these classes and some of the resources that are available can help you learn to do it right. Feel free to check it out and see what we do. It's challenging. Fundraising is challenging enough. The goal of FDO is to help you find funders faster, so you can, as I said, spend more time on the work that matters, like building the relationships with donors and then just generally serving your communities. Like any tool, you'll get better at it with practice. As I said, I'm available. The Candid staff is available with questions. If you have any other questions, feel free to unmute or throw them in the chat. And we'd love to hear from you on social media. Feel free to follow and learn more. And I think that's about all we've got today. So with that in mind, we'll kind of wrap things up. I will be getting you a copy of the video, as well as all of the resource information, and we'll take it from there.
I think my biggest questions are about how to actually access it, because I kind of learned best by just trying it out and seeing things.
Absolutely, absolutely.
What I can tell, the essential version of it is more limited in that you can't export things in the same way. You can't do Excel. You can't really dig into, especially what I want to do is to look at some other organizations that are similar and see where they've gotten funding to identify some new funding sources, and you can't do that. So I'm kind of wondering what options we have in terms of, I am a UWM student in our program, and like what options I have and when I might be able to access the more full version.
Yeah, we're hoping to have the full version, or the face-to-face version, we'll call it, available in time for the fall semester. And that would be available in the Golda Library. There'll be a bank of, specific computers that will have access, because they track all of this by IP address. So the goal is to have that available in the fall for general access. What was I going to say? I lost my train of thought. But one thing that we can do, I mean, I'm more than happy with my access that I have. We can set something up, and I'm going to stop